Horses don't bet on people. That's what our next guest's father told her when she was a little girl. No one betting on people would have bet she would become the first woman president of Harvard University, or even that Harvard would ever have a woman president. Harvard is now a month away from inaugurating its second woman president, Professor Claudine Gay, the daughter of Haitian immigrants. In her new book, former Harvard president, now Professor Drew Gilpin Faust, writes, "For many white Southerners of my generation, a life-defining question has been how long it took us to notice the contradictions between the democratic and Christian ideals intoned in church and school and the patterns of injustice in which our lives were embedded. When did the contradictions become troubling? When did they become unbearable? What was the moment of epiphany?" For Drew, the epiphany came when she was 9 years old. On February 12, 1957, she wrote a letter. "Dear Mr. Eisenhower, I am 9 years old and I am white, but I have many feelings about segregation." She asked the President of the United States to end segregation. Our games in the woods and fields around our house most often involved the refighting of Civil War battles when my older brother forced me to be Grant so he could be Lee. Years went by before I learned that Grant had actually won the war. Memoirs are personal history, but when a memoir is written by a distinguished historian, the lens is widened to include arresting facts like this. In the first Kentucky Derby run in 1875, 13 of the 15 riders were black. Between 1911 and 2000, no black jockeys competed in the Kentucky Derby. What happened? What happened to the black jockeys? Why did it happen? If you are a public high school student in Florida right now, they won't tell you what happened to the black jockeys and other black people. Drew Gilpin Faust's memoir is a beautifully written story of American pain and progress. The 9-year-old girl who asked the president to end segregation grew up to cast her first vote for president in 1968 for Dick Gregory, who ran a write-in campaign as the candidate of the Peace and Freedom Party. My write-in vote for Dick Gregory was one of 1,680 votes he received in Virginia. It was one of 2 votes he received in Clark County, where Nixon's total was 1,127, Humphrey's 768, and Wallace's 742. 742 votes for the segregationist and 2 votes for the black man. 40 years and 10 White House races later, Virginia would cast its electoral ballots for the first black president. Joining us now is Harvard history professor Drew Gilpin Faust, whose books on Civil War history might already be banned in Florida public schools, and whose new book is titled Necessary Trouble and may be well on its way to being banned there. So I will hold it up so the parents of Florida high school students will know what to look for to learn this true history of growing up in the age of segregation. This is such a beautiful and wonderful and warm book that I just couldn't stop turning every page of. The title, Unnecessary Trouble. Tell the story of the title. It's the only book I've read where at the end there is the story of the title and how this came to be the title.
The title, Necessary Trouble, is something that's probably very familiar to you. It's borrowed from John Lewis, who talked about how it's important to make trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. And in my years as Harvard president, I got to know John Lewis a bit. And at my last commencement, he gave the commencement address. And as he was beginning, he turned to me. I was sitting there in my presidential seat, and he said, "Madam President, thank you for making," he talked about my Eisenhower letter that you just quoted from, and then he said, "Thank you for making necessary trouble." And as I was writing this book in the years after that, I thought about how that phrase, necessary trouble, was such a perfect description of what my growing up had been like, which was I had to make trouble to escape the constraints and injustices of the society in which I was growing up in segregated Virginia. And a society in which my mother said to me, it's a man's world, sweetie, and the sooner you learn that, the better off you'll be. And so I was just in revolt from the time I was about 2 years old about little lacy clothes I had to wear till I started writing letters to Eisenhower. And I came from a very conservative, conventional family. So I just had to make trouble, and it was necessary to survive. So I called John Lewis about 2 months, 3 months before he died, and asked him if I could use this title, if I could use his words. And he, of course, being the wonderful, gracious man that he was, said, oh, he would be honored. I was more than welcome to do so. So I felt I had his permission, his blessing, perhaps even, in taking his words and using them for my book.
And you, like John Lewis, in your small way, lent a hand in the civil rights movement. You were of that college generation that was going south. And you tell the story in the book. I arrived at the Quaker Fellowship House in Washington, D.C. on June 22nd, 1964, to begin our orientation. The day before, 3 civil rights workers, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, had disappeared near Philadelphia, Mississippi. There was little doubt they had been kidnapped and likely killed by white segregationists. Dick Hyler tried to reassure us by emphasizing that from the beginning he had explicitly ruled out any Mississippi time for us, judging it too dangerous. But that seemed small comfort. I and others, I would guess, quietly wondered, well, is Alabama all that much better? But no one openly voiced fears or second thoughts. And you went to Alabama.
I did. This was part of a Quaker initiative to send students into the South to try to support civil rights, but also to try to talk to people who were segregationists. This was very much the Quaker spirit, talk across lines of difference. And so it was also not just the summer that Schwerner, Goodman, and Chaney disappeared. It was also the summer that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed. That was in early July. And that was the law that provided public accommodations could not be segregated. And so we spent a lot of time with our African-American hosts in the various cities in which we spent time, Orangeburg, Birmingham, Prince Edward County, testing this new Civil Rights Act and trying to see if it was being complied with when we went as integrated groups into public accommodations. And so it was a summer in which we were supposed to be reaching out, but most of the segregationists and the white power structure in the places we were located wanted very little to do with us and found us threatening and even dangerous.
So you had some good luck in your life. And one thing that just stunned me when I came across it was there you are at a high school in Massachusetts, sent off to Massachusetts to high school. And at a neighboring high school, small high school, private high school, you get to go hear a speaker one day who is Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. You're a high school kid, you get to hear him. What was that like? Well,
first of all, it was a lucky thing to go to high school in Massachusetts because I got treated very seriously as a girl with intellectual aspirations, and that had not been
for the
case.
First time.
Really, really. But we were invited to go to Groton School for a speech that Martin Luther King was going to give. And I think he was at Groton School because the head of Groton School was a man named John Crocker, who was a devoted advocate of civil rights way back in the 1950s, before white Northerners took paid much attention to these matters. And he got to be friends with Martin Luther King when Martin Luther King was a graduate student at BU. And so he asked Dr. King, won't you come and speak? And Dr. King, out of feeling friendship for Reverend Crocker, said, yes, of course I will. And so in February of 1963, just a few months before the March on Washington speech, I Have a Dream speech, Dr. King spoke, and I went and sat in a library anteroom with a whole bunch of other students and listened to a speech in which he kind of prefigured the I Have a Dream speech. There was a student who illegally taped it and kept the tape for years and years. It was just discovered a few years ago. And it is a speech that is quite remarkable. And it talks about America being a dream and how we realize the dream of America. And I got to sit there and listen to these inspirational words that also challenged us and said, more or less, you complacent Northerners, what are you going to do? And there's nothing worse than a person who's indifferent or inactive in face of injustice. So it just reinforced every inclination that I had expressed as a 9-year-old and that I felt even more fervently as a 15-year-old when I heard that speech.
And then toward the end of college, you got the word that one day at school that Martin Luther King was assassinated. You describe it as, you said the news physically hurt, made it almost impossible to breathe. What was that day like?
It was at a gathering to celebrate the history majors and their upcoming graduation. Of course, he was assassinated in April, and we would be graduating in early June. So this was kind of the end of the school year, and we were at the house of the chairman of the history department having an ice cream social, and suddenly the news came that he had been shot. And I struggled to how to explain it in the book. It was as if I'd been hit on the head with a plank. I mean, I just really felt it all through my whole body. And of course, we all felt it in our hearts and souls. And it just seemed unimaginable that this great and good man, this hero, had been eliminated from the face of the earth in such a devastating way. And of course, the United States erupted immediately after that with violent protests and one, I think it might have been, can't remember which news person it was, but a famous newscaster said, this is the most violence the United States has seen since the Civil War. And I think people were just so distressed they didn't know what to do. And some turned to violence, others turned to despair.
You were told in, I think this is one of your high school teachers or administrators, who gave you an attitude toward education. And when she said, you must open yourself up to the notion that you have a lot to learn, that what you do not know is close to infinite. A sense of ignorance fuels the desire to overcome it. Humility is a prerequisite for being educated.
These were the words that were delivered to the freshman class entering in the fall of 1964 at Bryn Mawr College by the president of Bryn Mawr College, who had been there for decades. And you would sort of think, who is this old lady? Except I will never forget those words that she delivered to us, because it has seemed to me such a foundational part of learning is you just have to say, I don't know things. And I tried to make that a watchword of my presidency at Harvard. Let's all try to open ourselves and practice humility. I think every aspect of life, you are well served by taking that position in relationship to everything around you.
I've always taken certainly intellectual humility as a sign of where one really ended up on the education scale. I was once asked, what's the most important thing you got in college? And I said, an understanding of the enormity and permanence of my ignorance.
Yes.
And that sends you off into every other subject.
It means you can't stop, right? You just have to keep learning.
What are your concerns about those high school kids in Florida who won't be able to find this book in their school libraries?
I'm so distressed about the notion of censoring books, but also censoring history and the teaching of history and what we are going to tell about the past, and the notion that nothing you learn should ever make you uncomfortable. Everything you learn should make you uncomfortable, because learning is about growing and changing. And if you're unwilling to change, if you're unwilling to even stretch, what's the point? So I worry deeply about what kind of country we can be, what kind of people we can be, if we don't admit that learning is meant to expand us, to lead us to ask questions, to find books that maybe our parents have never read or heard of or approved of. Certainly, if my parents had approved of everything or had to approve of everything I did, there would have been no letter to Eisenhower. I don't know who I'd be. I had to make trouble to get to where I could have access to a wider world.
Drew Gilpin Faust, the book is Necessary Trouble. Please, you owe yourself this book. You owe every student you know this book. This is, it's not, look, it's a Harvard professor's book, but look, it's not a big, thick thing. You can have a fun summer weekend with this book. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Really an honor to have you here.
It was a
really
great
appreciate
pleasure.
it.